Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you guys doing? I hope you guys are doing great. So now today we are gonna be refuting Haris Sultan, and we are gonna totally obliterate him, totally destroy him. Okay, so I've actually done uh, two lives prior to this. Okay, sorry, I've done two videos prior to this. It was a different style. It was pre-recorded. It was edited. I thought I'll try this. Now this is a slideshow where I'll be putting this as a slide, right? I'll be putting this as a slide. So what this will allow me, hopefully, is to refute his book easily and more often. Okay. So let me know if my voice is better. Let me just check. Just hold on a second. Give me like 2 seconds. Okay, I'm pretty sure that is better. That is going to be better for the audio, inshallah. I'm just gonna post this and let everyone know that I'm live right now on my Instagram, and then we'll just go with it, inshallah. Bismillah, Bismillah. Right. Let me just do this. There we go. Bismillah. Okay, so we are going to be covering Haris Sultan's book, The Curse of God. I have done it, the introduction, the first and second chapter. Today we are going to be covering his third and sixth chapter. Why did I decide to cover his third and sixth chapter? Because the way that he has formulated his book is kind of weird. It's kind of really weird. So what he does is actually he makes moral arguments against Islam. This is what Haris Sultan does. He makes moral arguments against Islam, and after doing that, he then in the sixth chapter, so basically third, fourth, fifth, are kind of like moral arguments against Islam. And in the sixth chapter, he discusses what morality is. It should have been the other way around, right? In the sixth chapter, in the third chapter, he should have discussed what morality is, what is the basis of morality, and then he should have gone on about discussing why his view of morality is correct and why Islamic view of morality is wrong, and then give examples of the Islamic paradigm. So what he does is he kind of gives the example of sex slavery. He kind of gives the example of the character and the treatment of women in Islam and radicalism and all that thing. So he does that, but he gives his view on morality later on. Walaikum assalam, everyone. So this is what I'm gonna do. First, we are gonna discuss his view on morality. Okay, we are gonna refute that, because if we refute his view on morality, then the rest of the argument that he has made throughout his book, okay, majority of his book is moral argument aimed towards Islam. We can refute that way easier. So this is how I'm gonna take this. Okay, Bismillah. So let's just move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is basically the book. These are the chapters. The first chapter is the art of thinking. Okay, the second chapter is necessity of religion. The third chapter is the baggage of religion. We're going to discuss this today. The sixth chapter is morality. So look, in the baggage of religion, he talks about morality. He talks about the baggage of religion, the things that you have to believe, the moral things that you have to believe, and how it is illogical and all that stuff. Okay, then in the God hypothesis, he talks about hatred of women. Okay, genocide, simple evil, right? He talks about evil in the fourth chapter. Literally, it's written there, simply evil. Okay, in the fourth chapter. Then in the fifth chapter, he talks about the character of Muhammad, where he talks about violent, womanizing, and he gives the example of his wives and all that. But in the sixth chapter, he talks about morality. It doesn't make any sense. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna refute the sixth chapter first, because if we just refute his view on morality, we refute his third and fourth and fifth chapter very easily. Okay. Okay, yeah. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. I'll be taking these questions in the end. Okay, inshallah. So morality in chapter 6. he gives the first of all, he gives this view of Richard Dawkins. Do you really mean the only reason you try to be good is to gain God's approval and reward? That is not morality. That is just sucking up. Okay, he thinks this is like some kind of gotcha moment. It's not. It's not Harris. It is not Richard. This is not some gotcha moment. Okay, no, there is a difference. Okay, there's a difference because we truly believe. Okay, to gain approval of God is something that is good. It is not trying to it is not just trying to suck up to someone. It is trying to actually be good. We believe in objective morality. We'll discuss that going on about objectivist or subjectivist when we see his moral framework. Okay, so the thing that I've highlighted, we'll be discussing that because that is where he kind of makes his argument. Okay, so first of all, he says, okay, so he talks about the Richard Dawkins idea of moral zeitgeist. Okay, so this first of all, okay, let's read this. As Professor Richard Dawkins calls it, the shifting moral zeitgeist. Zeitgeist was a term first coined by German philosopher George Hegel. According to the Oxford Dictionary, is a defining spirit or mood of history as shown by the ideas and beliefs of time. For example, throughout most of recorded human history, slavery was part of the zeitgeist for most of the civilization of the world. However, according to Professor Dawkins, shifting moral zeitgeist, we can see how almost every collective everyone collectively discarded slavery in the 19th century and 20th century. So yeah, first of all, he talks about Hegel. Okay, this terminology comes from a German philosopher, Hegel. Okay, Hegel first of all believed in a God. Hegel believed in a spirit. Okay, first of all, Hegel believed in, he was an idealist. So this is a philosophical term. I'm not going to get into that. Hegel believed in idealism. He believed he had a concept that were kind of universally accepted, were called spirit or zeitgeist. Okay, were called spirit. According to Hegel, this spirit had objective reality. This spirit had objective reality. Okay. Then from here, Hegel used to jump to universal spirit, the most objective or absolute being, you can say. Okay, he would use different terminologies because he had a different metaphysics, but this is the kind of view he had. Hegel believed in God. I honestly believe that Richard Dawkins hasn't really read Hegel thoroughly. Neither has Harris. Harris clearly hasn't. Okay, Harris clearly hasn't. Okay, so Hegel did believe in God, and when Hegel used these terminologies, he had a preconceived notion that God existed. Because you need to understand, Hegel's whole philosophy was kind of countering to Kantian philosophy. Kant said you cannot prove God. Okay, Hegel said you can, and then he gave these kind of metaphysics. Okay, which basically is the phenomenology of spirit and all that. Okay, so the point that I'm making is, Harris Sultan doesn't really know what he's talking about here. Okay, then he goes on to say there is no such thing as absolute morality. Okay, so I'm skipping parts that are not necessary to refute him. Okay, what his view is, only that part I'm using here. There is no such thing as absolute morality. Morality is meant to be ever-changing. We have come a long way from Bronze and Dark Ages. It is not wild to imagine that the common morality of the people of the 23rd century will be very different from our own. We only got rid of human suffering from slavery a century ago. We recently acknowledged that women are not inferior to men, and we are starting to acknowledge homosexuals with equal rights. We are only starting to remove unnecessary human suffering. Our morality is constantly evolving, and so it should. The moment we stop, we will stagnate, and that will be the beginning of the end of our progress. Okay, so Harris here has mixed up a lot of different philosophical views. He talked about human suffering, okay, which comes from consequentialism and utilitarianism. Okay, basically the concept that we should maximize pain and minimize suffering. Okay, then he talks about evolution, okay, which is driving morality from evolution, constantly evolving. Then he also talks about the end of our progress. This is Hegelian, okay, or which later on became a kind of a socialist perspective. Okay, so he's mixing all these different philosophical views. He's making something khichdi bana raha hai basically. Okay, he's making something own. Okay, but we can kind of see where he is going. His view is, and his recent debate, he said that he views morality in a consequentialist view and in a utilitarian view. Okay, so we are gonna assume we are gonna view this book by what he just said. Okay, and you can watch his debate with his most recent debate. I don't exactly remember the name of the brother, right? And in his view, in his debate, he clearly mentioned that he's a consequentialist. Okay, so yeah. So first of all, I like to talk about there is no such thing as absolute morality. Okay, so morality, okay, morality is used in different. The word absolute regarding morality is used in two different ways. Okay, the word absolute regarding morality is used in two different ways. One is absolute. Absolute could mean universal, meaning everywhere it applies the same. It is not relative to situations. It can also mean objective, meaning it actually exists, meaning for example, when I eat ice cream and I say the ice cream is, for example, I eat chocolate ice cream and then I eat vanilla ice cream, and then I say chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream. This is subjective. This is my own opinion, right? There is no such thing as chocolate ice cream being better than vanilla ice cream outside of my subjective experience. Okay, there's no such thing as vanilla ice cream being better than chocolate ice cream in reality. It's just my own experience and how I decide to experience reality. Okay, the thing is, if there is no objective reality would be that it is not based on my mind, that I'm not deciding conclusion based on my interpretation of reality. That would be objective. For example, 2 plus 2 is 4. My mind is not interpreting this reality and coming up to the conclusion that it's 4. 2 plus 2 is 4 in reality. My mind is just understanding that reality, right? 2 plus 2 is 4. Okay. Or for example, I'm wearing glasses. This is objective reality. The thing is, when you say that morality is not objective, when you say morality is not objective, what you end up basically saying is that, or you say morality is not absolute, what you end up basically saying is that, Haris, that morality is like me deciding flavors or which is better flavor. If I say killing a child is bad, or so for example, cutting a neck of a human being is bad, but cutting a tree trunk is wrong. This is, if it is subjective, it is like me deciding chocolate is better than vanilla. Because it's just how I interpret and how I feel, how I subjective experience decide. It's my own opinion. It is not actually part of reality. It is not actually bad outside of me. Okay? If I cease to exist, then for me it is not bad. Okay? So I hope that is clear. So basically, if Hari is saying there is no objective, absolute morality, he's saying that morality is just like you deciding which flavor of ice cream is better. It's basically like that. Okay, if you guys have any question regarding that, you can ask that right now. Okay, the answer is simple. Okay, the idea of what is good and what is bad comes from our own thought processes. He basically, like said, right, subjective. As species, we have established it is not okay to murder or rape anyone. We basically, as a species, decided and came together to say it's not okay. But the thing is that it is not universal. That's the point. A rapist would disagree. He would say, okay, who cares? Who cares? Right? A rapist would say, no, I don't accept that morality. Like a homosexual says that I don't accept your morality. Like 100 years ago, homosexuals used to be so few. Now there are many. But 100 years ago, there used to be so few. And they used to say that we don't care what people say. We believe this is moral. This is fine. Right? So if a species comes together and decides something to be good or bad, it doesn't mean that thing becomes good or bad. Right? That democracy doesn't decide if something is good or bad. And that is another fallacy. And that is another fallacy of Sultan. Okay, the istuat or naturalistic fallacy. Okay, which he does talk about, and we will be refuting his counter argument to this. Let's move on. Okay, Islam promotes amputation for thieves. That's where the ball stops rolling, in Islam at least. But there is a reason why not most Muslim countries don't practice. Why most Muslim countries don't practice amputation for thieves. Through reasoning, we have come to the conclusion that any criminal should be given an opportunity to rehabilitate after their punishment. This reason is good enough to stop punitive amputation. Okay, so he gives a reason why. Clearly, in this example, modern reasoning has answered the odd question. We will be discussing that in the next slide, inshallah. Theists could argue and claim ownership of the idea of consequences and claim the religion gives you the idea of punishing the individual. But again, it would be another wild claim that people from these religions existed. They didn't understand the concept of consequences. Certain apes, chimpanzees, and okay, so I'm not gonna go there. Okay, so now he talks about we answer the odd question by giving a consequence. If the consequence is bad, then it is we ought not to do it. Okay, if the consequence, if the consequence is extreme, we ought not to do it. This is a fallacy. This is completely a fallacy and a straw man. Haris Sultan, he doesn't understand the is to ought fallacy, and I will prove that. I will show that by actually showing you passages from a philosophy book regarding is to ought fallacy. Okay, so let's go. Let's read further what Haris Sultan has to say of is to ought. Okay, and I'll explain what is to ought means. Okay, so he talks about Shapiro used a common theist line. So there was a debate between Ben Shapiro and I believe some atheist, Sam Harris, I believe, and they were debating, and Shapiro used the common theist line, or the argument that was inspired by the philosopher Hume. Science gives you it, okay, but religion gives you ought. By the way, Hume didn't say this. Hume didn't say science gives you is, but religion gives you ought. That's Shapiro what he said. Okay, Hume said science gives you is, but cannot give you ought, and I'll show what basically he said. This is another wild claim with no solid basis behind it, and it is true science gives you what is, but reason, not religion, gives you how things ought to be. Reason is not only the best way to answer ought, it is in fact the only way to answer it. Now this is an absurd claim and shows Horace has no clue about the is to ought fallacy. This is absurd. No philosopher talk like this. Because I know what the counter argument that philosophers have tried to give for is to ought fallacy, and it is not this. Haris Sultan is using his, like, I'm not trying to cause an ad hominem, but Haris Sultan has made a horrendous argument here. Okay, and I'll show that. As demonstrative above, the religious ought claim is absolutely false and has no reason to take it seriously. Reason is a basis for a better morality. Now this is a philosophy book that I studied in my own bachelor's. So I'm going to discuss what the is to ought fallacy is. Okay, fact and value distinction. The reason that philosophers talk about is to ought fallacy is what science tells you is a fact. The is the fact of reality. Okay, but what you ought to do is a moral value. It is a value that you assign to that is. Okay, so basically you assign a value to reality. For example, so everything is made of atoms, right? In science, a tree is made of atoms. Okay, there are many living organisms, okay, that can be made of the same molecules, carbon, hydrogen, all that's in a tree, but it is living. Let's say a dog or whatever. Okay, it's possible. Okay? Now there are two beings with the same molecules, atoms at least, the same proton, neutron, electrons. Right? They're made of the same things in fundamentally. Right? Why is it that the thing is that this is biologically a different being? It is biologically a different being. A tree is biologically a different being. Right? But why are we ought to not hurt a dog? And why ought we have no problem with cutting a tree? Why are we assigning this value differently to these two things? Okay, just because they're factually different. Okay, why? How does it follow that we assign different values to this? This is what the fact and value distinction is, which is the Stuart fallacy. Now I'm going to read this. Many philosophers believe that all naturalistic ethical theories are based on a mistake. The failure to recognize the facts and values are fundamentally different sorts of things. Those opposed to naturalism, anti-naturalist, argues that no factual descriptions ever leads automatically to any value judgment. Further argument is always needed. This is sometimes known as Hume's law, after David Hume, who was one of the first to point out that moral philosophers often move from discussion of what is to discussion of what ought to be, without further argument. Anti-naturalists claim that the furthest argument needed to move smoothly from facts to value, or as it is sometimes put, from is to ought, is impossible to give. Fact and value are different realms, and there is no logical connection between the two. Okay? Say human happiness and moral worth. Following G.E. Moore, anti-naturalists sometimes use the term naturalistic fallacy, which Haris Sultan is doing, okay, to describe the alleged mistakes of arguing from facts to value. A fallacy being a type of bad argument, Haris. A fallacy being a type of bad argument. Okay, let's move on from this. Now let's further. Now, one of the best ways to show the issue with this kind of reasoning is by G.E. Moore. The argument that shows the problem with jumping from is to ought. This argument, first used by G.E. Moore, is really just a way of making clearer people's existing beliefs about ethics. It is a way of showing that most of us, in the way that we think about such moral terms as good or right, have already rejected the naturalistic approach, the approach of Haris Sultan. Okay, and G. Moore, by the way, was a professor in, I believe, Cambridge. Okay, I believe G. Moore was a professor in Cambridge or Harvard. I'm not sure. So he's a top philosopher. Okay, and Haris Sultan, he's a bacha, yeah, a kid, intellectual kid compared to these guys. And he's saying that there. And what is Haris saying? Okay, what is Haris saying? Let's go back. What is Haris saying? Haris saying there is no solid basis behind it. Okay, as demonstrated above, the religious ought claim is absolutely false and has no reason to be taken seriously. This is what Haris is saying. And then we have these huge philosophers like D.E. Moore saying this is a fallacy. Okay, and saying that most of how we approach morality, we have already rejected the naturalistic approach, which is the approach of Haris Sultan. The argument is this. First, take any statement of fact from which ethical conclusions are supposed to follow. For instance, it may have been a fact that all the choices available to the Good Samaritan, helping the robbed man, was the one that would cause the most happiness for the greatest number of people. On a utilitarian analysis, which is form of ethical naturalism, which Haris Sultan affirms, it would logically follow that helping the man would therefore be a morally good action. However, an anti-naturalist using the open question argument would point out that there is nothing logically inconsistent in saying this action is likely to give rise to the most happiness for the greatest number of people. But is it the morally right thing to do? If this version of naturalism were true, it would not be worth asking such a question. The answer would be obvious, as it is the anti-naturalists argue it remains an open question. Okay, so basically the point is that this is what the is-to-ought fallacy is. An anti-naturalist would claim that the same sort of question could be asked about any situation in which a description of natural qualities is supposed to give rise automatically to an ethical conclusion. The open question is one way in which anti-naturalists give support to their slogan, no ought from is. Right? Now, let's go back. Let's go back to the argument that Haris gave. So Haris said, okay, why we do ought we basically ought to do. Okay, so how he talked about that, we basically, where is that? Let me see. Yeah, I believe it's here somewhere. Yeah. Clearly, in this example, modern reasoning has answered the odd question. Let's see his reasoning. Okay, so through reasoning, we have come to the conclusion that any criminal should be given an opportunity to rehabilitate from their punishment. Why? Okay, so but there's a reason why most Muslim countries do not practice amputation for thieves. Why? Because they should be there. They ought to be given. So basically, Harith Sultan is making this argument. Thieves or any and like thieves in this example should not be amputated. Rather, reason tells us they ought to be given. They ought to be given a chance for rehabilitation. Okay, but G.E. Moore would say, but is this the morally right thing to do? How are you coming to the conclusion this is the morally right thing to do? Just making a claim that we ought to do this. There's no reason for you to make that claim, right? This is basically what G. Moore is saying. So let's move to the next slide. So right till now, he completely destroyed Harith Sultan's moral framework, his point, his morality that he's building. You've completely destroyed that, and now it's easy to just destroy basically half the book of Harith Sultan. Why? Because now Harith Sultan is going to argue for morality. Most of his book is arguing for morality that is inconsistent, illogical, as we have shown, and even self-refuting. Why? Because he's mixing multiple philosophies together. And he doesn't know that because he has no basis in philosophy. This guy is just a self-taught, wants to be intellectual. Let's be honest. Okay, yeah, so let's move on. The baggage of religion. Okay, so let's go. The baggage of religion. So he first argues morally correct people in a society who do not have any religion. Okay, so people they're morally correct people in our society who do not have any religion. Okay, so he's talking about they're morally correct people. Okay, so he starts off talking about baggage of religion is that we do not basically what he's saying, we do not need religion. They're morally good people. But the thing is that you have no argument to base your moral view on, as we have discussed. It's fallacious. So you cannot make the claim that they're morally correct people because your whole view of morality is fallacious. Get the point? Right? Do you guys get the point now? His whole view on morality is fallacious, so you cannot make any moral argument from now on. Okay? Because it's completely subjective. There is no objective morality in his view. And it's self-refuting, according to big philosophers. Okay. I often wonder how our world would have been if we had no superstition. Okay, I'm going to skim through it. Now he talks about the baggage of religion and he gives examples of this. The Constitution of Pakistan publicly discriminates on the basis of religion. Why does he say that? Because the government of Pakistan does not allow non-Muslim to be the head of state. Now this, according to him, is discrimination and immoral. Now, okay, now let's say basically what he's trying to say is that if Pakistan was secular and liberal, okay, then there would be unity. There would be, everyone would treat each other equal. And then what would be the case is that everyone could be the head of state. Yes, that would be the case, but should it ought to be the case? That is the whole problem that Harith Sultan does not understand. So his whole book falls apart now. Right? Let's go ahead. I find religion not only dangerous but simply useless. This is absurd, right? We have seen so many good things come out of religion. Charities come out of religious people. Okay, how are you saying it has no basis? It is simply useless. Hospitals, okay, so many religious people make it. Yes, it is true. A lot of religious people are good people because of religion. I need to understand something. Okay, there are people who want to be good, who desire to be good, right? But they don't have any guideline on how to be good. Religion provides them this. Okay, so it is not useless. Okay, so apart from morals, another justification religion defenders give is that since God created everything, we have to play by his rule. Okay, who gives this? Islamically, who gives this? I don't know. The thing is with Harith Sultan is He is using arguments against Christianity. Okay, we don't say just because God created it, oh, we should play by his rule. No. Okay, just because something is created by something, it doesn't mean that it should be played by rule. There's no logical necessary implication. The reason we say this because the God created our universe, okay, but he's also all powerful, all wise, all just. Okay, these all of his attributes, okay, the entity of God, the being that he is, those attributes together imply that we should worship him because he is worthy of worship. Okay, Haris, I don't know. So he's basically strawmanning the Islamic position. And he does strawman a lot more because of the next point that he tries to make. Okay. So before that, okay, before the next slide, I would like to talk about moderation in belief. Okay. اقتصاد في الاعتقاد by Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah. Why am I talking about this? Because Haris Sultan now bases a whole chapter on an argument by a Christian. By a Christian. He bases his entire rest of the chapter on an argument by a Christian and then refutes that argument, okay? And then based on that, tries to refute Islam. When that is not the Islamic perspective. Our scholars would not agree with that argument, okay? What is the argument? It is a Pascal wager, okay? First, why would we not agree with it? Okay, we'll discuss that. Okay, so first I took a brief snippet from Imam al-Ghazali's book on creed. Here it talks about it is incumbent upon us, without a doubt, to know whether we indeed have a Lord. If we do, is it possible that he is a sayer in order to command and forbid, assign obligation and send messengers? And if he is a sayer, is he powerful so as to punish and reward if we obey or disobey him? And if he is powerful, is this specific person truthful in saying, I am the messenger to you? So we have to prove Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have to prove it, okay? If this becomes clear for us, then this is definitely incumbent upon us if we are rational, to be cautious, look out for ourselves and devalue the perishing world like in relation to the everlasting hereafter. For the prudent is the only one who prepares for his hereafter and is not deluded by this worldly life. Okay, the objective of this science, which is the science of basically proving God, okay, and proving the creedal points based on reason, is to erect a demonstration for the existence of Lord. This science proves God decisively. We do not gamble. We don't assume we prove God. We don't assume that let's assume God exists. Okay, we don't accept that in Islam. Okay, his attributes and his acts, and for the truthfulness of the messenger, as we specified in the table of contents. All of this is important and is indispensable for an intelligent person. For an intelligent person, it is necessary for him to be able to erect a demonstration for the existence of his Lord, exalted is he, subhanahu wa ta'ala, his attributes and his acts, and the truthfulness of the messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you say, I do not deny this incitation in my soul to seek the truth, basically, but I do not know whether it is a product of my disposition and nature, a dictate of the intelligence, or a religious obligation, for people have different opinion regarding the sources of obligation. Morality, he's talking about morality. Then you will indeed know this at the end of the book where we deal with the sources of obligation. So Imam al-Ghazali is basically, rahimahullah, is basically saying that if you're an intelligent person, then you need to prove all these things. Where you're getting your morality from. Why is your messenger the messenger? Why is God God? If he even exists. And if he exists, how do you know he exists? It is indispensable for an intelligent person. This is the Islamic Sunni view. Okay? This is the Islamic Sunni view. Now, the issue is Haris Sultan doesn't use our paradigm. He uses a Christian philosopher's argument and then uses that to refute Islam. Why I left Islam? Why is this guy using a Christian's argument? Okay, which is Pascal's wager, a Christian philosopher. Why is he using his argument? to refute Islam. What does a Christian's argument has to do with why he left Islam? It doesn't make any sense, does it? So yeah, what is the argument? What is the Pascal wager? Okay, so here the Pascal's wager was a French mathematician and a philosopher proposed a wager known as a Pascal wager or Pascal's gambit. Pascal proposed that believing in God is better than not believing in God, as if you believe in God, whether He exists or not, you lose nothing. But if you don't believe in God and you turn out to be incorrect, you will burn in hell for eternity. Professor Richard Dawkins explains the problem with this wager in the book God's Delusion. So basically, this guy has a Gora complex. Okay, this guy has an inferiority complex to fight people like Richard Dawkins. Simple as that, and this is like pretty obvious. Just because Richard Dawkins talks about Pascal wager, which makes sense. He's his target audience is Christians, not Muslims. His main target audience were Christian, because the people of his land were who believed in God were mostly Christians. Your target audience isn't. Your literally cover page of your book says Islam, why I left Islam. Just because he used this argument doesn't mean you have to. You're talking against Islam. So use other argument, otherwise it's a straw man. So he goes on to say, where he explained we cannot consciously choose to believe or disbelieve. We only believe in something that has evidence behind it. Okay, so this is first of all, this is incorrect. This is incorrect. Okay, first of all, Pascal didn't mean this. Pascal himself didn't mean this. Okay, so first of all, let's explain what Pascal himself believed. Pascal was a Christian. Pascal believed reason does not decisively prove if God exists or doesn't exist. You cannot be 100% certain. According to his Christian, because Christians obviously don't have the proof like Islam do. Right? So he said you cannot decisively prove it. But he said that we have enough evidence, okay? We have enough evidence, we have enough reasons, okay? And we have, if you were to gamble it, it is more rational to gamble on believing in God rather than disbelieving in God. Okay? So he was a Christian. He believed that we cannot decisively prove Islam. Muslims do not say that. Muslims say we do believe we can decisively prove Islam and God. We do decisively prove Islam and God, and that is why we believe in Islam and God. That is the whole concept of yaqeen in Islam. This is the straw man. There is no reason for him to quote this argument. Okay, so let's move on. Pascal wager didn't. Okay, and also the point where you don't believe, you cannot believe in something that has evidence behind it. You cannot. You can only believe in something that has evidence behind it. Basically, Richard Dawkins is saying that you cannot believe in something that does not have evidence behind it. First of all, what the reason that Pascal himself said this is because if you believe in something or try to believe in something, you do their practices, you try to reason, you try to reach a conclusion, you actively participate in that culture, and that would either cause you to believe, even if not certain, or it would cause you to actually completely believe it, okay, or come closer to believing it, and then you can look at the arguments. This is the kind of view that Pascal had. Pascal was not stupid. Okay, he was a pretty smart mathematician and a philosopher. Okay, so these guys do not understand this, and also, no, you can believe in something without evidence. Okay, like that's basically what lies are. Like, that's, or you can even be in denial, even if you have evidence against it, but due to some biasness, you just deny it. That's called being in denial. We have psychological studies on these stuff. It's completely wrong. And then going on, Pascal Way didn't really touch on ideology, but was about the people who believe in God and committed all sort of crime inspired by this belief. I do not believe in any defender of religion, but find it hard to explain where the inspiration to blow up people in coming forth. I would not claim that the Quran encouraged the idea. So basically now, using Pascal wager and then talking about Islam. What? This is not our argument. We don't use this argument. Why are you using this argument and then talking about Islam? Using a Christian's argument and then trying to refute Islam. This is literally what a straw man is. Okay? So yeah. Now let's look at Pascal's argument. I believe we don't need to go through this. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, this is fine because we are already very long in our recording. So yeah, thanks to Pascal, I now believe in Allah and all His rules, and then 99 gods are false. Okay. Moreover, Pascal's proposition is absurd as it supposes that his God is the only correct God. According to some estimates, there are close to 10,000 gods invented. Okay, first of all, Pascal, okay, it was not stupid. He knew that this argument could be made, and he did. If you read him thoroughly, he would say that there are reasons to believe that Christianity, according to him, is the most valid belief. Okay, but yes, he would say it's not certain. That is why he would call it a gambit. But he would say that the reason that you should gambit on Christianity is because, according to him, is the most possible. Okay, maybe he didn't get the evidence of Islam yet, but regardless, Muslims do not use this argument, so it's still a straw man, and they are also misunderstanding Pascal himself. So, what kind of book are you writing? Okay. Now, in conclusion, since it is wiser to believe in God and His rules, I would have never heard of Madonna or Noor Jahan or Tom Hanks or Shah Rukh Khan, and instead I would have stoned a lot of men and women to death, possibly waged a war on other humans for someone's political, economical greed, and probably died prematurely, hated and separated from my own family because of their lack of belief. Pascal suggested that if you are wrong in believing in God, then it does not make any difference. It makes a hell of a lot of difference. If the belief in God turns out to be wrong, the last few pages do not disprove God, but certainly the proof that the price you pay for believing in a non-existence or incorrect God, Christian if you are Muslim or Hindu if you're Jew, is immensely large. Am I expected to live my life with so much unnecessary baggage over scripture written by man in cave thousands of years ago? Islam can be blamed for all the above mentioned problems. रोना रोना डाल रहा है बस, ठीक है. He's crying. Why are you talking about Shah Rukh Khan, Tom Hanks? Why are you trying to like you're making an emotional argument? No one cares. Okay, you did not watch Shah Rukh Khan. What the hell? Why are you telling me this? I don't need to know. This is not an argument. This is not disprove Islam. Okay? And then you're saying Islam can be blamed for all the above mentioned problems. First of all, you're making all moral arguments now. All the moral arguments. Why doing this is bad, why doing this is bad. And by the way, Islam does not even say about this. So this is bad, that is bad. We already said your whole moral framework is absurd and illogical, and I showed you proofs from philosophers. Okay, and then you're using Pascal's wager. Okay, literally. At the top of the page, thanks to Pascal's wager, I now believe in Allah. Thanks to Pascal's wager, I now believe in Allah. Thanks to a guy who is a Christian, who believes that most rational belief is to believe in Christianity, I believe in Allah. Are you stupid, my guy? Okay, let's say you do believe in Allah. Okay, but the thing is that the argument that Pascal is using, okay, and we would say that even if we say that, okay, it's a fine argument, it's not completely like a bad argument, like it's a logically sound valid argument, let's say. Okay, and we can say that it's a logically valid and sound argument because he's not making an argument deductively or with certainty. He's choosing a gambit. But the point that I'm making is that this is not the Islamic argument. Islam does not use this kind of argument. In Islam, the theologians, the scholars of theology say that we need to, with certainty, prove Islam and God. We cannot just gamble. Because if you just gamble, then what is your yaqeen? We cannot say that it is possible that God does not exist. It is possible that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam lied. That is kufr. Okay? That is kufr. So yeah, we do not believe this kind of argument. We do not affirm this kind of argument, meaning we do not affirm this kind, we do not prove Islam by this kind of argument. And our scholars do not use this argument. So you should have tried to refute our argument that our scholars made. Okay? So yeah, this is where I end today's session. Alhamdulillah. We covered 2 chapters in like relatively short time, 45 minutes. So if you guys have any questions, like let's take the questions. Some brothers did write the question. How was the talk? How was the slides? Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, inshallah. So yeah, thoughts on Ali Dawah recent claim saying Quranic miracles are debunked. He is under criticism for Quranic miracles. Like, what does he mean by Quranic miracles? Scientific miracles? Like, clarify that, brother. Morality isn't subjective. If that was the case, then the significance of law would be little. One could think morally killing is good, while others would say killing is bad. Yes, and that does happen. Okay, there are people who do think like that. And that is why they don't feel any remorse against their against the one they're killing. Further, then how will one identify objective morality? Like according to the Bible, morality is different. According to the Quran, it is different. First of all, we need to discuss for morality to be objective, what are the requirements? Okay, then we basically will come to the conclusion that it has to be God, meaning all wise, all knowing, all just, and all those attributes. Some entity has to have those attributes. Now, then we need to know that entity needs to tell us those morality. So we need to decide who. There are different people claiming that this is from God, that is from God. We need to decide which scripture is from God. For that, we have other arguments. We have Islamic arguments, like from prophecy, from the linguistic miracle of the Quran, from the character of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Christians, they have their arguments. And the thing is that Muslims do not have absolute issue with the arguments that Christians made, because Isa alayhi salam was a true prophet, so he could have had prophecies. But the thing is that Islam has way more arguments, and the linguistic miracle of the Quran proves Islam with certainty, objectively, if you say, right? So that is why we say it's Quran. Brother, you need to look at the authenticity of both the Bible and Quran. Which, okay, so you answered that. Okay, understand that, or Hindu. Okay, so authors of the Bible, eyes of Ali Dawah, face of Daniel Haqiq. What is this? Eyes of Ali Dawah. You cannot see my face, brother. Well, then should have miracle. Okay, brother, minor or major, good cannot make mistakes. Okay, yeah. So if you guys have any questions, I'll just wait like a few seconds. If you guys have any questions, leave them down. If you don't, let's end, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, good discussion though. I really enjoyed this. So next, inshallah, maybe not tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, day after tomorrow, or even possibly tomorrow, we will be refuting the rest of the chapter. So we have done 1, 2, 3, and 6, right? So 4 are done. We are left with basically 5 more, I believe, inshallah ta'ala. So yeah, let's end today's session. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.